different example of APIs and what is exactly API testing. All right. So now I gave us an example. I said the software, the payment application that you worked on in your groups last week, or the last assignment you were given, you were told to perform an exploratory test on that payment application. All right. So, and some of you did well, others just, but we'll discuss that tomorrow. We'll discuss that tomorrow. Okay. So, we said API is application programming interface, and it is what enables two different softwares to communicate with each other. All right. So the mechanism APIs are mechanisms that enable two software components, two software functions, all right, to communicate with each other. A function and a service to communicate with each other. That's how APIs work. All right. So we said whether it is whether application or a payment application that you see on your mobile phone, on your web or a web application on your system, your laptop, your PC, and all of that, whether it is a desktop app or all of that, just know that some of these applications sit down on what we call APIs. So we'll give an example of e-commerce site. So you want to do a payment by PayPal after purchasing one or two stuff in an e-commerce site. All right, you know what an e-commerce site is, just like Konga or Jumia. So you've gone there, you've selected products, and you want to make a payment. So, and you say, see, pay with MasterCard or pay with PayPal. What we are saying is that those people actually integrated the APIs from PayPal or from MasterCard into their own system. All right. So that was what we call what API. Right. So when the buyer clicks payment button, an API calls to retrieve information, also known as a request. So the moment you click on make payment, that button is like an endpoint that is what making a request to a remote resource somewhere, to the web server, all right, via the API's uniform resource identifier. You know what uniform resource identifier is? All right, it's just like saying www.google.com. All right, so your URI. So it's making what's the name? It's making a request to a URI somewhere, to an endpoint somewhere, and it includes a request verb, header, and sometimes a request body. So we'll talk about the components later. So all you just need to understand is that every software has what? An application programming interface that is integrated to it. All right. So after receiving a valid request from the product web page, the API makes a call to the external program or web server, in this case, the third-party payment system. So the server sends a response to the API with the requested information. So the moment you click on submit, all right, click on payment when you submit. So it retrieves the information and then sends a response. So it's a form of request and response. All right, request and response. So the API transfer the data to the initial requesting application, here the product website. So while the data transfer will differ depending on web service being used, the request and responses will happen through an API. So the manner in which that information get displayed on your interface, all right, or the manner in which when you click on submit, it start loading and then it returns a response and say, yeah, enter a token, or your payment complete. The manner in which that happens, request and response, that process is what we call what? Application programming interface. So there is no visibility on the user interface, meaning APIs exchange data within computer or application and appears to the user as a seamless. So I said whether it is a desktop application, computer, or mobile application, all you need to know is that within those softwares, there is an exchange of data, and the manner in which this data gets exchanged and we see it as users, okay, all right, it's called what? APIs. You don't really need to see how the API works. All you need to see is the information that is retrieved, all right, or the request that is being made. let's continue. So why are APIs important? API makes things easier for everyone. It helps developers work more efficiently, get more things done. You can imagine wasting precious time while building a separate API just to be able to call list of countries, blah blah blah. So what we are saying is that it makes your work easy instead of um just building an application that does not have maybe services depending on you, or doesn't have APIs, a procedural manner. Instead of doing that, it's better to just build what an API. API will like break down the entire system and make the application more easy to use. All right. So these minor bugs will become bigger during GUI testing. GUI is means graphical user interface, and what graphical user interface testing is doing is to check for images on an application. So it will check, okay, is this button well placed? Is the button broken? Is it well linked to the frames and all of that? So that's what we call graphical user interface. So it's checking the user interface for the user. So we are saying that sometimes when the APIs is not well integrated with your applications, there can be bugs, such as what there can be bugs while testing the GUI, while performing a GUI test. All right. So I know some of us will have seen things like that before, where you discover that an image is not displaying and is showing one broken image icon like that. So that happens because there's a problem somewhere, and the APIs are not well integrated, or probably there's no even APIs for that application. So we are saying that, so finding those bugs in the API testing will be cost effective to the company. So API testing is quite helpful in testing core functionality. So we can test the APIs without a user interface. In GUI testing, you need to wait until the application is available. So what we are saying is that what are the advantage that the API have over GUI is that before it gets integrated, and then before you start seeing the application interface, I mean your application, your mobile app, your web app, before you start seeing it, there are APIs somewhere that you have tested, you have checked, and you are sure that, oh, these requests are giving these responses. All right. And you don't have to wait till the entire application is built up before you test. But as for GUI, you have to build the whole thing from scratch, from beginning to the end, and you have to wait till the whole development is done before you start testing. And that's the edge API testing as over GUI testing. So why is API testing? Why is it important? So we are saying API testing is important for because it's like it breaks down your applications, make it flexible, make it easy to use. So we say a popular API example is the function that enables people to log into website by using their Facebook, Twitter. So you can all agree with me that instead of, sometimes when you visit some site, they will ask you to use your Facebook to log in. They know that some people find it difficult to start entering email, start entering password, or try signing up and all of that. Sometimes it wastes time. Sometimes you are just tired. Sometimes you just feel like, are these people trying to get my data and all of that? But when you see sign up with Facebook, you are ginger. I feel like, okay, that's fast, and then you click on it. So before you know it, Facebook retrieves that site retrieves your data from Facebook, and then returns a response to you that, oh, successful and all of that. All right. So underneath that is what? An API. So we also have Internet of Things. These smart devices offer added functionalities such as internet enables touchscreen data collection through API. For example, a smart fridge can connect to recipe app. I know you know examples of that. An example is also a smart screen where you are watching your YouTube at home, maybe from your phone, and then it is asking you to connect to your smart screen TV and all of that. All right. So the process through which you do that connection, there is an API also for it. So you also know travel, booking, comparison, mapping apps, Twitter, and all of that. So APIs are important for all of these things. So you are saying, look at this on Twitter. I said each tweet contains descriptive core attributes, including an author, a unique ID, a message, a timestamp, when it was posted, and geolocation metadata. What we are saying is that your personal information on Twitter can be aggregated into your specific ID, into the person that authored the tweet, like that is an author, into a unique ID. Everyone that tweets on Twitter has a unique ID, including your message, the content of your message, including when you posted it, a timestamp, and when it was posted, and also your location. So the process through which you are doing all of this, all right, API is enabled for all of these processes. All right. So we also talk about map. Sometimes when you enter your location, maybe you want to go somewhere and you don't really know where you're going to. The moment you start typing in that location, you start seeing different suggestions coming up, coming up. All right. So APIs is also done. It's also at the background of all of that. All right. Sometimes they ask you to enter an address in an app, and then you start typing number 12. So even when you're not done with writing the location, it's already bringing out what suggestions. It's more or less like as if Google APIs or wherever, or Apple APIs for address has been integrated to that particular address interface, such that when you type it in, it makes a request, and then it completely, and it also sends a response to display it. So we are saying that API is important. It makes our life easier. All right. So API protocols. We have different protocols when it comes to API. There's something called SOAP. All right. There is XML. There is JSON. There is REST. All right. So I will just emphasize majorly on REST right now. So REST is a set of web API architecture principles, also known as RESTful API. So REST adhere to certain REST architectural constraints. So what we are saying is that by the time you start testing your APIs, you will discover that there are different protocols when testing APIs. All right. And one of those protocol is what? Is REST API. All right. And this kind of APIs takes the format of JSON. JSON means JavaScript object notation. That is, there's a way in which the objects are scripted such that it is in the form of key and value pair. It's not here. So, but when we get to that part, you will understand. All right. So when you start testing, you will see the importance of protocols. But there's something that you are seeing here that you are probably used to: HTTP, hypertext and protocol. All right. So HTTP, you see HTTP sometimes when you are trying to access a domain, or you are trying to go to a URL, and then you just see HTTP, HTTPS. All right. What that is saying is that this site you are going to is secured, and there is a protocol governing it, which is what? HTTP. All right. So, and most of the time, it enables endpoint to send and receive data. So when you type in, for example, let me go to my browser and use that HTTP as an example. Something you are sorry. Let me go somewhere else. Something you are all used to. Okay, so HTTP, you can see that I think the last address I went to here is what? To YouTube. And you can see how HTTP is coming up. So for an endpoint now, this is YouTube, for example. YouTube is a web application. This YouTube right now is YouTube's web application. All right. So if I want to like go to maybe I want to go to my home here. No, I want to go to my, let me say, library. You discover that there is a slash feed and there is a library here. So on this, it stops at library, meaning that there is a library endpoint. This is what we call endpoint. All right. The endpoint is that resource on your protocol when you are trying to perform a data exchange, especially retrieving of data from a resource in API testing. All right. So when we get there, you will understand it better, because it looks like okay. So we said it enables endpoints to send and receive data through SMTP, HTTPs. So SOAP APIs make it easier to share information between apps and software components that are running in different. So all of this protocol makes it easy to send and receive data, to transfer data, and that's it. Let's continue. APIs versus web services. When I was defining APIs the other time, I said it enables two different application functions to interact together. It enables an application function and a web service to interact together. It enables other functions to interact together. So what I'm trying to say is a web service is a software component that can be accessed and facilitate data transfer via a web address. You know what a web address is? It's an example of the one I just showed you now, youtube.com. Because a web service exposes an application's data and functionality to other applications, in effect, every web service is what? An API. Every web service is an API, but not every API is a web service. So there are some APIs that are not web service. All right. But if you see any web service, just know that it is an API. So APIs are any software component that serves as intermediary between two disconnected applications. While web service also connects applications, they require a network to do so. Where some APIs are open source, web services are typically private and only approved partners may access them. So what we are saying is that there are components of software that APIs stand in between to what? To integrate them together. It's like a bridge. Let me put it that way. When there are two disconnected roads, what do? You construct a bridge. That bridge will connect side A of the road to side B of the road. So sometimes what do? You also build an API to do what? To connect some components of a software to another component of an application. All right. So you can see an entire application where the only, maybe especially most of the time, even web application, the only API there is probably the sign up and login. All right. So for that case, in that scenario, you are connecting this API as an intermediary, all right, to what? To that software application. All right. So where some APIs are open source, so there are different. So when we get to different kinds of API, we'll talk about that. So different example of API. I think I've mentioned this before. Okay, this is like a practical scenario now. We said assume an API as a waiter at a restaurant. At a restaurant, you give an order based on the item available on the menu. A waiter in the restaurant write down your order. So you go to a restaurant and you want to order for something. You have gone through their menu and then you write down your order. So on the items available on the menu. So a waiter in the restaurant writes down your order and delivers it to the kitchen. Who prepares your meal? Once the meal is ready, the waiter picks up your food from the kitchen and serves it to you on the table. Imagine, just look at the interaction. So you are the customer. There is an order which you have written and you pass it on to what? To a waiter. So a waiter writes down your order and does what? Delivers it to the kitchen. Kitchen receives the order and does what? Prepare your food. So once the meal is ready, the waiter picks it back and what? Picks it up from the kitchen and then serves you. And that is how API works. In this scenario, the waiter's role is similar to an API. As a waiter, the API takes a request from a source, takes that request to the database, fetches the requested data from the database, and returns a response to the source. Let me say it. Let me say that again. So I said, as a waiter, the API takes a request from a source. So there is always a source. So the API will take that request from a source, takes the request to the database. Like, so it fetches it. So first, it is a request. All right. You make oh, I want this. You are placing the request. So what happens? The waiter goes and does what? And also requests it from the kitchen. So he requests it from the source and then takes that your request to what? To the database. So they prepare it and then they cook it and then fetch the requested data from the database and return the response and then returns it back to you. So what do you notice there? There is a request, there is a source, there is a fetching of your request. I mean, from there's a fetching of a resource from the source, all right, and there is a response being delivered, all right. So let's continue. We said, what is API testing actually? Because we've been talking about API. How does that apply to testing? So API testing is a software testing type that will validate an application programming interface. The purpose of API testing is to check the functionality, reliability, performance, and security of the programming interface. In API testing, instead of using standard user input, like instead of typing in when you were explaining your application, you were just putting things and then an output. You use software to send calls to the APIs, get the output, and you will not just take note of that and note down the system response. System response is important while performing API testing. All right. So looking at the diagram, you see GUI testing. So GUI testing, this part is the presentation layer. This is what you see as the user that is using the application. You see the user interface, you see login, you see home page, you see about us, you see all of that there. All right. So that's graphical user interface works at this level. All right. So at the other level is what we call the business layer. And we have application user interface. So this is where your API, this is your core API, this is the core, and this is where the API functions. All right. So it is in between, it is the intermediary, like we said earlier. Now, looking at the one behind there, it says it's the what? The database layer. So when you send a request, so here from this interface, you type in for example, you are making a payment for an e-learning course and you put in your card. It asks you to input your card details. All right, let's assume that is the presentation layer here. Then it's going to like send that request, that is informations of your credit card. It will send it down to the APIs and then it will fetch it from where? From the DB, and then it will return back to you. All right, and then you will say, oh, successful, or input authorization token and all of that. So that is how the API works. Now, we said API testing. Now this is now the practical aspect of API. So in every API testing you are doing, you have to take note of URL, of endpoint, of parameter, of headers, of token, and of API methods. That is get, post, put, delete, patch, and so on. All right. So we also have put, delete, patch, and so on. So I will explain each of it one after the other. So this URL is like what? Jumia.com, or I can say www.jumia.com. That is your what? Your URL, like we showed you the other time, youtube.com. That is your URL. Um is your resource. Let me put it that way. That is your resource. Then we also have your endpoint. Your endpoint is a specific point of entry in an API, and is most crucial part of the API's documentation. But to get anywhere beside the home page, like groceries or other pages, you have to you need the endpoint. So when I was showing youtube.com the other time, I said slash library slash something something. All right. So that is what we call endpoint. Endpoint is the exact resource you are trying to um it is the exact resource you are trying to retrieve from your source. So this is like your source, www.jumia.com, but there is something specific you are trying to retrieve from jumia.com. So probably it is groceries you want to buy from jumia.com. When you access this particular grocery.com, where should it direct you to? Let me copy this and let me see if it will direct me to. Okay. Did it direct me to groceries.com? I think it did. So here I can see groceries, seafood, Midlo, and this, that, and that. All right. So what we are saying is that there is a source here, which is like the URL, all right, www.gmail.com.ng. But there is an endpoint called groceries. And it's not only groceries that exist. In fact, you will discover that there are other endpoints. For example, if I come to home now and I go to supermarket and I click on let me click on something like electronics, you can see that it has changed from w.this.com slash it's now electronics. So there is an electronics endpoint. So the way Jumia has designed is such that all electronics are in their own category. All rushes are in their own category. Every other thing are in their own categories, and all of them are endpoints. All right, for the APIs. So we can actually say that Jumia has what? Their own APIs. All right, let's continue. Um, I was showing you something. You say parameters. So while you are testing endpoints, you must take note of what? Parameters. So API parameters are options that can be passed with the endpoint to influence the response. So these are like your search filters. And depending on the parameter you set, you get a different response each time. So what we are saying is there are parameters. Let me open my Postman. There are tools for that. So Postman is one tool that you can use. You can use other tools as the case may be, the Swagger and all of that. So, but in this class, we'll be making use of Postman. All right. So I think I have my Postman here. I have my Postman here. Can you see my screen? So this is how a Postman look like, and this is how the interface look like. All right. So if I want to go to jumia.com, just like I went to it from the browser, what I will do here is come here and say create a basic HTTP request. So I want a request to Jumia. Oh, yeah. I want to rename this. Where did I create it? Okay. Okay. I wanted to rename it. I don't know why. Not here. Okay. Let me call this one. Let me call this one. A collection is it's a group of endpoints of APIs. All right, that's what we call a collection. So it's like so a program that manages your APIs. All right. So let me call this lesson 4. Lesson 4 collection. And in this collection, I will create a request and call it Jumia. Okay, so I'll call this Jumia. So what I want to do first is I want to get Jumia's home page, not groceries. So let me see, get Jumia's own page. So we've not talked about get, so I will come back here. Let me explain everything first before coming to this place. So there's something called header too. API headers are like extra source of information for each API you make. API token. Then we have get, post, put, delete. Now this is very important when performing API tests. You must always know that this is very important. They are called API methods. So when you are performing a get, what you are trying to do is you are trying to retrieve a resource. All right. You are trying to retrieve a resource, all right, from the remote, from the server, from wherever you're trying to retrieve a resource. But where you are performing a post, you are trying to create a new resource on the server or on the remote. You are trying to do what? Create a new resource. That is what we call post. And when you are performing a post, all you are trying to do is you are trying to add maybe just one object, just one function, out of the list of so many to you are trying to add it or modify a resource. Let me put it that way. You're trying to add or modify a resource, but not permanently. All right. There's also a delete. Delete is saying you are trying to remove a resource from the remote. All right. And patch. Patch is also modify. So patch and put have their own different definitions. So the assignment is go on and understand, make the check the difference between put and patch. Let's continue. So I wanted to show you something on Postman. So this is Postman, for example. This Postman, for example, I've created this just now, and this is this is Jumia. This is Jumia resource, and if I click on this, it should get me Jumia. So I'm saying get me Jumia. And you must also know that when you are returning your response, this part is what we call the response part. All right. This part is what we call the response part. When you are getting your response, you must check the format to which your response is being returned. All right. So now you can see that I can fully access Jumia. This is Jumia, as you can see, Jumia Nigeria, online shopping for groceries and so on. All right. And the status, oh, I didn't mention status code. All right. I think it should be on my PowerPoint. Status code. Aha. So we didn't finish. So there's something called HTTP status codes. All right. So this happens when you send your request and it returns a response. Now come here. Come here. I sent in this request. This is Jumia. All right. This is the request. Get. And this is the way I send it. I click on send. And that's it. This is the resource. I said get me Jumia. All right. Get me what? Get me Jumia and send it. And it did what? It's returned. What did it return? Status. Okay. This is what we call the status code. Okay. HP status. Okay. All right. Let's continue. We'll come back. We'll come back there. So we said there's something called status code, which you need to also read up on. Yes, 200, okay, 404 not found, 500 internal server error, 504 gateway timed out, and so on. So by the time you start testing, you will know all of this status code offhand. There's also response time, which you need to take note of. When you are testing, you have to check how fast can this resource be retrieved from the remote. How fast will it take? How fast will it take to retrieve? Because I don't know how, if you remember when Jumia do all this, their Black Friday. So they'll do Black Friday, they do so, and you see a lot of people on the same site, on the same product, trying to buy the same thing at the same time. So if Jumia application was not well tested before that time, you just discover that the application you are trying to access is crashing. You get a broken link, or the site is dragging, or by the time you get there, it is telling you that sorry, sorry, you are too late or something, and of course you are on the exact time and you are still too late and all of that. So it's possible that it's taking a lot of time to return response back to the customers, to the users that are accessing that resource. So you have to check for the response time. How long does it take for this site to load and return back the response to the user? All right. So we have response time, we have error codes in case API return any error. I said it just now. There is an error code. Error code is also like HTTP status code. So we have 404 not found, 404 is an error code. We have 401 unauthorized, and so on. All right. So we have authorization check. Is this user an authorized user to access this platform? I will show you how you do that. We also have non-functional testing such as performance testing. I just mentioned performance testing just now. Performance testing is that one I just described, that, oh, you are trying to, so many users are trying to access a resource at the same time. So you are trying to check, oh, if we have 1,000 users at this time, with the application break, with this resource break, with the web page break, with the endpoint break, or will it drag? How fast will the resource be retrieved? All right. Is there a load balancing and all of that? You have to check when you are doing the test. All right. So those are the things you need to take note of while doing your API testing. I think this is just showing to you that, oh, this is the application client. The application client is that your interface, that your jumia.com.ng. All right, is your application client, and then there is an API in between. Okay, and then there is the server stroke data source. All right, and then there is the API response. Okay, so this, you notice that this is up to 4 now, unlike the 3 I showed you the other time. All right, this is just like a peripheral description of API testing. But by the time you start real testing, this is what you will notice. You will notice that, number one, there is the resource you are trying to access. All right, this is the application client. Number two, there is the request you are sending, your get put patch or whatever, and then there is the server or the source where you are retrieving the data from, and there is also the response you are getting. All right, so that's the architecture of API testing. Now let's go to tools and resource. I think I didn't complete this page. I'll complete it later before I send it to you. And this is to show that this is how the Postman interface look like. And then we have assignments. So let's go back to our Postman tool. So I said, number one, I'm trying to access jumia.com. So this is jumia.com, for example, right? So this is the what, their own page. This is what you will see when you go to jumia.com, online shopping for groceries, appliances, more, and so on. All right. Will I truly see that? Let me check if I will truly see that. Will I truly see that? Will I truly see that? All right. Okay. So this is what, jumia.com.ng. This is what you get to see. And your response code is what? So let's go to that groceries. See if we can retrieve groceries. Groceries. I went there the other time. So I'll copy this URL here. I'll come back to paste it here on the post one. I'm doing this because you are just starting out to know how to work with API test. On a normal day, you are not supposed to even come to the browser. You don't really need it, because most of the time you are testing your APIs even when the application has not been fully developed. All right. So let me call this one groceries. Groceries. Okay. So this is groceries, and it's, I can see 200. Okay, meaning that I was able to successfully access this. So that is get. So we are saying that get says retrieve from the resource. And for you to understand this better, I have there's something you will do. There's www dot what's that site? Res I think let me check my PowerPoint again. There is a site I asked you to use for your assignment. This site explains it better. Okay. Oh no. Request response dot in. Request response dot in. Okay. So this is what I'm trying to say. There is a method called get. There's something called post. There's pull. There's patch. There's delete, and all of that. So what this site will help you do is it will help you to learn how you actually do your request response and what response you will get when you send a request. You get familiarized with how API request response, how it works. So that is what this site will do for you. So when you get home, you just practice it more. So for example, now I'm saying get the list of users. Okay. If I do this get list of users, see, this is the request and this is the response. All right. If I say get single user, this is the response. How do I know? Let me come back. So remember this is the what? The source. I will copy this and I will put it on. This is we call it base URL, but just so you understand, is the source. So add a request and call it uh response request. Okay, I'll put it here and saying, but that is not all. Then I will come here and look for that endpoint. There is an end. Oh, sorry. Okay, so there is an endpoint called this. All right. So there's an endpoint called API slash user slash two. We are saying that if you go to this endpoint, you will get this response. So let me go to this endpoint. So I'll copy this. I will come here. I'll come here and paste. Okay. So this is my source, don't forget, which is like my base URL. But this, my friends, this is the what? Endpoint. API slash user slash two is the endpoint. All right. So I want to retrieve a user's number two user from the API that is what? That is inside of this source. Request response dot in. All right. I want to retrieve it. I want to get it. So when you click on send, this is what you will see. Now, does this tally with the response that is on their site? Let's confirm. You can see that this is showing 200. Okay. Now I will come here. I don't want to keep. Okay. I will come here and I will check. This is what is the same thing. ID number 2, email janet.weaver@this.com. So come here. Is it the same thing? 2 janet.weaver@this.com. All right. So that is how you do a get. All right. So I have done a get for groceries and for this. Now, all right. Now, let's do a post. So we said post. What post does is what? It creates a resource, a new resource. It doesn't get it, it doesn't retrieve it, but it creates one. Okay. Now, there is one post here. Is it one? Okay, there are two. So which of the assignment did I give you? That means you will have to do the other post. Let me do this one. Let me use this one. Create. So this post is saying create users. And who are these users? Morphos, whose job is what? A leader. Now, when I was explaining what you need to know about API the other time, I made mention of a request body. Now, this is the time for you to know what a request body is. All right. So I will copy this endpoint. This no, don't go there. Don't go there. Posts. I will copy this. All right. Create a new request. Make it a post call. Add a request. Call it request post. And I will come here, change this method to post. All right. This is where you see all your method, get, post, pull, patch, whatever that we've been mentioning. So you select your post, then come here and do what? Paste it. Remember, there is a source. If you just do this, it will fail because the source is very important. What are you retrieving? You want to retrieve user API from where? It's not there. So let me come here and copy from where I'm retrieving it from. So I'm retrieving it from here. Okay. So API endpoint users. So it's telling me ID 377. Even though this thing says it is created, what am I trying to do? So when you are testing API, you have to put in mind what you are trying to do as a user. You remember I said I want to show you how to create a new resource. But right now I have pressed send and it still gave me a response. But this is not what I'm trying to do. Even though I'm getting created, I'm seeing a green here looking as if it has passed. But it has not. Why? Because that is not the requirement. The requirement is that I should pass in a request body. So this is where you go to a body here, a request body. Then I will change this to a JSON format. JSON is JavaScript object notation. Okay, so I will come here. Yes, I will come here and copy the request body. This is the request body here. What I want to do is I want to create a new resource, Morphos and leader. But me, I'm going to change it to I want to use one of your names here. I will put Catherine Ojo. Okay. So let me say Catherine Ojo is a tester. Catherine Ojo. And I will say your job is what? Tester. All right. So I'm trying to create tester, creating Ojo on this request for this server on their DB. I want it to exist now. It does not exist before. All right. So that is what I'm testing for. If I pass this thing, if I pass it, that is, if I send it, if I pass it into using post into the server or the database, will it create the resource and return a successful response? So let's see. Did it create it? Is it successful? That's it. So I have Catherine Ojo, whose job is tester and whose ID is 729, created just now. So if perhaps this is the response is supposed to return to me, then I've successfully created this user in the database. Right. So that is what you are testing for when you're doing API testing. So we've done get, we've done post. I have an assignment for you. Let me even change the assignment. So the assignment is for you to do a post, create. I'm going to change it now because I've done the create for you. So instead of doing post create, do post register successful and unsuccessful. Let's see. Mm, okay. I will edit this thing later. So any question for me while I edit this later? Any question for me? Question, question, question. Feel free to ask. Right? Questions. You can ask your question now. Today is the last major lesson. Tomorrow, what we'll be doing tomorrow? What we'll be doing tomorrow is to review everything we've learned. You ask more questions tomorrow, then, especially the assignment that you worked on, the group assignment. We'll review it tomorrow. But for today, if you have any question for API testing, you can ask. I hope you understand. Hello, can you hear me? Do you understand anything at all?
No. Yes, I can hear you.
Very hard.
No.
Okay. Uh, all right. Like I said, it's just an introduction to API testing. So as time goes on, you will understand. Go through that site. Request response or in. Go through it. Do make sure that you perform each of those methods one after the other. They've already given you the kind of response they want you to have. All right. The responses are there. So if you are not getting it on your end, then it means you are not doing it well. See, for example, I clicked on patch and see the response it is bringing out. So when you are doing your own, if you are not getting this, then you are not doing it properly. Also, remember to put in your request body. Oh, I almost forgot something. There's something I need to show you on Postman. So request body, there's something called request body, which is this that you click on. There's something called authorization. Okay, so under authorization, what you do is there are a lot of different authorization. As you can see, the moment I click on authorization, I clicked on this. You see inherit authorization from Postman, no authorization. There's no authorization because there are some endpoints that does not require you putting authorization. There is API key, there's bearer token, there's basic authentication, and so on. So if assuming it is a bearer token that is needed, meaning that for you to access that endpoint, all right, or for you to access that resource, all right, you need to be authorized. For example, there are some applications that require that it's only the admin that will access it. They've been given the admin super user permission. Or there are some applications that user roles differ. The manager role, what you have access to is different from what the sales people, the sales executive will have access to. In such case, the permissions and roles are designed into the application. And so when you are testing the endpoint, you discover that you might need some forms of authorization like this. So if it is the case where you require a bearer token, for example, then you might need to enter a token. So the developer will make sure that while he was developing that endpoint, for example, he puts into consideration this bearer token. So he will give the tester the bearer token, and this bearer token will then be required each time that user comes to access the application. Some bearer token expires within 24 hours, some 12 hours, depending on what has been set for the token. So anytime you come after such hours, when the time has elapsed, you come and then you impute it before you can access any of the endpoints for that collection or for that project. All right. For example, if it is a project I'm doing, if it is like a first bank project, or if it is like let me see OP app, I would have named this OP, put this as OP, and then I would have added all of the endpoints under here. and I will have categorized each of the endpoints. If it is the one that belongs to MasterCard payments, I will have said, okay, let me come here. I will say add a new collection, name it, OP. Then under naming of OP, I will say add a folder. If the first one is saying integration of OP with MasterCard, I will name it as what? MasterCard. If the second API is saying integration of let me see, add folder. If the other one is saying integration with PayPal, I will say with PayPal, and so on. All right. So under each of these, there will be endpoints. If this one is saying perform a a debit transaction or something, then you can also name it here. But then you can also name it here. You can name it from here, or you can name it from here. All right. So you can call it debt and so on. So these are the endpoint. The endpoints will be under each of the modules or each of the functions, whichever name you call it. So, and that is how you can access your endpoints. So what I'm trying to say is that when you as you progress, you learn it better. But this is the basics of API testing. All right. This is the basics of API testing. I hope that is clear now. You have authorization, you have header, you have body, you have test. You can read more. I will add more links to what you can read on the slide and then forward them. All right. So that is the class for today. We also edit this before sending it to you. I've done this, so I don't expect you to do the create anymore. So you do other posts and then you might not need to submit this one. This is just for you to increase your skill, to improve your skill. Yeah. So any further question?
Yeah, good evening, ma.
Yeah, good evening.
Yeah, I want to know this postman, is it a free tool?
Is it what?
I
It's
said,
free.
is the
Yes,
tool free?
it's free. It's free.
Oh,
Definitely free.
oh, okay, okay. Thank you so much for
Yes.
the class.
Yes. So you download it and play around with it.
Okay, okay. Thank you, ma.
All right, you're welcome. All right, in the absence of no question, I say we round up this class. So thank you for being present in today's class. This marks the end of all the manual software testing series, right? Mind you, what you are testing or what I've taught you today in API testing is also still manual testing. There's also something called API automation. So all of this is still manual. So this marks the end of manual software testing. Thank you for, I know some people followed through from the beginning to the end. And I can tell you that after today or after tomorrow, you start making your money in the industry. But don't let money be your focus when you are just starting out. Let experience be your focus. Try to work more on projects. The first thing you work more on is exploratory. That's the basic, like the one I gave you last week. See applications that you can play around with, right? Then from there you improve your skill. And if you are just starting out, like I know some people are already working, there are junior QAs among us, but if you are not part of them, maybe you're just starting out, then my advice is going to be that you work as an intern under somebody. All right, work as an intern. They might not pay you, or will I call it a volunteering thing, sort of. Try to use that to gather experience, increase your portfolio, and make yourself marketable, right? So from there, at least you can do that for 3 6 months, and then from there you can get someone is asking a question. Let me stop presenting. From there you can get proper job. All right.